This podcast may contain strong language and adult themes. Greetings, we are back for another edition of Voice Notes from Moi. Voice Notes from Connor, the podcast where I'll be listening to old voice memos and notes from my past self and responding as my present self, with some guests along the way. However, at this point, episode 8, we have had all of our guests now, so the next 2 episodes, you're just going to be hearing some voice notes from moi, from my past self. So, let's take it away. Let's listen. Evan informs me there's one shorter voice note from my past self and one longer voice note from my past self. So I'm intrigued. I cannot remember. At this point, I cannot remember what's to come and what I've recorded over a matter of months or even longer than that. So let's get into it. I think one of the best theories of all time, and I don't even know if it's a theory, I don't know if it's just fact, to be honest, is the idea of power and identity, and how if you have an aspect of your identity that is marginalised or is discriminated against, oppressed, etc., you will try and gain power through another part of your identity. So, for example, some black men might become more, or feel like they have to be more hyper masculine, so they have to exaggerate gender elements because they may be victims of racism, and therefore they lack privilege in regard to their race. How some gay men might go to the gym, become really muscly and more manly to make up for the fact that they have an oppressed element of their identity, which is their sexuality. Middle-class women might lean more into their class to gain some kind of power or cultural capital, etc. I just think that's such an important theory, and we see it happen over and over. So that's what I said at the start of this. Is it a theory or is it a fact? Okay, yeah, theory or fact, or somewhere in between, because we don't always have to deal with a binary. I suppose it can be somewhere in between. I said in one of the previous episodes, one of my favourite words is nuance, so I like to add a bit of nuance to everything or where I can. So I'm going to start off by just talking a little bit about a theory that is more well known now, and it's been around for a few decades, and that's, theory or the concept of intersectionality, which is really, really important. I remember when Ariana Grande tweeted years ago saying, if your feminism ain't intersectional, it ain't feminism. So the term intersectionality had come from feminists. It was Kimberly Crenshaw, if I've pronounced that correctly, that first popularised the term, looking at how the law basically didn't always account for different parts of people's identity and the overlapping aspects of people's identities and how that might form privilege, oppression, discrimination. So, like, on one hand, I suppose something that's people might see as like structural privilege, and then on the other end of the spectrum, structural inequality, oppression, discrimination, etc. So she was looking at a case where a black woman didn't get a job in a factory, I think it was. You can see her talking about this. She's got a TED Talk on this, which I would go and look at go and watch on YouTube if you've never come across this concept before, where the black woman said that she didn't get the job because she thought, she was discriminated against, and it was because of her race and gender. And the factory came back and said, well, no, because we employ women and we employ black people, but it was black men. So then Kimberly was like, well, she's a black woman here, so you don't have any black women, so therefore she was discriminated against on the grounds of her race as well as her gender, not just one of them. Other people like Bell Hooks has talked about this as well. Oh, legend, absolutely love Bell Hooks. I teach Bell Hooks some of her feminist theory in my lessons. It's part of the specification for A-level media studies. It's in a lot of curriculum and specifications as well for degree level study, and so it should be. I think she died of kidney failure or liver failure, something. Some part of her body failed her, but what a legend is Bell Hooks. So I would also go and read some of her work because it's fantastic. And she was also talking about the ways in which different parts of your identity will overlap and intersect to form that privilege or that oppression or somewhere in between. So then what grows out of that is this idea, as I was talking about, my past self was talking about in that voice note, about power and identity, and how I don't think this is necessarily a really conscious thing that people are doing. I don't think, as I give an example, they're like gay men who are hyper-masculine are like saying to themselves, I will now be hyper-masculine because I'm gay. I have a structurally oppressed aspect of my identity and now I'm going to make up for it in this way. I think it's a deeper psychological concept. It's also shaped by social and cultural expectations and discourses as well, not to alienate too many people here by getting too academic, but hopefully if this isn't something you've come across before, it's quite interesting to think about your own overlapping, the overlapping aspects of your identity, whether parts of your identity will relate to structural or systemic privilege. So I explained I can't remember what episode it was now, Evan, but we did talk a little bit about this idea of like privilege and stuff, and we're saying like the dominant groups in society, well, in Western society historically, so white people, straight people, cisgendered people, able-bodied people, middle-class people, etc. And we can, I think that's actually why a lot of, like, say, white straight men become, there's been a lot of criticism of white straight men and white straight men. The Empire Strikes Back. We've seen that many times, haven't we, on social media, Andrew Tate, etc. These kind of men feeling like they're being attacked. But when we look at it in this kind of feminist, scholarly way, it's because the reason that's a problem, even though they can't necessarily help it, is because they belong to all these different dominant social groups, and therefore they have a lot of privilege and power. Even if they couldn't help it, can't help that they were born white, still doesn't mean they don't, they still have that systemic and structural privilege. I went slightly off track there. We're talking about bringing Andrew Tate in, and that was a side note there. But yeah, so thinking then about aspects of like power and identity, that if you think, okay, well, actually this part of my identity doesn't allow me to have any form of privilege or benefit in society, well, I'm going to then try and get that through something else. I think that's a really fascinating part of humanity. And us as humans, our society, whether this, because I don't actually know this, whether this is more of like a Western context and our society, like Europe, North America, or whether it's a global thing, perhaps. I'm not quite sure on, I'm not going to speak loads about that because I'm not quite sure. But yeah, it's something we see happen a lot. I mean, Bell Hooks had written about this with black men, think about black masculinity, and that was something that she'd also suggested, that this hyper masculinity might be to find power in such a white world, to find that power then through masculinity and becoming more masculine and leaning into gender power helps them to find some kind of place in society, in the world, etc. I mentioned before that I used to play tennis, and tennis is a very, very middle-class sport, and something I'd observed through a lot of white middle-class women that played, that throughout my life, I generally really get along well with women, which isn't a surprise. A lot of gay men or queer men historically have had very close relationships with women. They might share a femininity, they might share an oppression or a discrimination in society as well, maybe having similar interests, etc. So that's something that's been known for a long time. So when I was younger, I much preferred the female members of the family, had a lot of female friends, just felt, I would call it almost like naturally, even though I don't think actually that much a part of our identity and stuff is very natural. I think, I'm very much leaning into the ideas of social construction, but I felt naturally more aligned with women, more comfortable around women, tend to be a bit more open. This isn't, let me just say it now, shall I? Not all men are not open and not friendly and not this, because I do have friends that identify as men or whatever. It was just throughout my life, that's where I found comfort and safety, similar sense of humour and stuff. And then when I went to play tennis, and like I'd interact with these women, and not that I think that all women have to be really friendly and feminine and gentle. I don't think that at all, actually. However, I was quite shocked by how much I didn't get along with a lot of these women that generally, whether it was women of colour, lesbian women, disabled, also all these different overlapping intersectional things, I generally would get along with a lot of women. And then one day I realised it's not that it's not gender isn't a part of this, actually. I think there's an aspect, of course, of race, because an ethnicity, because there always is, but also because of their class, that they had a bit of quite, some of them could be quite bossy and quite that's what I'm looking for. You could just smell the middle classness coming off them, and that wanting to be quite controlling. And I think now, if I had to get theoretical on it, that's because they're trying to find some form of like power through that maybe doing a sport or tennis is giving that ability to do that. And I think Bridget, she talks about this with netball as well, how there's some women at netball that she's like really shocked at how like horrible they are to people, and like really bossy and patronizing and stuff. And we always wonder, and I'm not saying this is a fact, we just wonder what their home life is like. You know, if they're married to a man, what's that like? How much control do they have in that space? How much control do they want to have? And then they go out into this other arena, field, place, and then they try to gain that power. And I think I talked about it already, but with gay men and queer men especially, some sections of the community or culture being more hyper-masculine, you pass easier then, don't you? You pass amongst the masses a bit easier. And that could be, for some people, might just be for health and mental health and physical well-being, but also could be about wanting to be accepted, not judged, not wanting to be victims of homophobia or treated badly by other men, but also because they know that their sexuality in our society, maybe not so much nowadays, but especially historically, was giving them, they were discriminated on that. Let's be more manly, and then I'm going to fit in more. So that's something you might want to reflect on in yourself. Have you done that yourself before? Have you leaned into an aspect of your identity intentionally or unintentionally to gain some sort of place, comfort, power? It doesn't always need to be power in like a really like patriarchal, masculine, dominant way. Just like a sense of belonging in being and feeling more comfortable, and like you're not going to be marginalised or oppressed, etc. That's interesting for myself, actually, because I've just asked you to consider that. Now I'm thinking, have I ever leaned in to any aspects of my identity to do that? I don't feel like I have, but that's something I'm gonna reflect on, actually. But yeah, I think it's, academics come up with theories all the time, and theories are challenged. They're invalid in some ways, they're accurate in other ways. They're a theory, they're an idea, they're something to be put out into the world and then tested. However, this one, I feel like my own experiences, things I've read, things I've watched, interactions with people in real life have led me to believe this is probably a little bit more fact than theory, and it's part of humanity to do that. So yeah, okay. I got a bit academic on you there. I tried my best not to get into try not to make it too complicated, but you might have learned something there, so there we go. Right, that was the shorter voice note, so now we're going to move on to a longer voice note from my past self. I've recorded quite a lot of voice memos at this point, obviously across a longer period of time. And this one, I suppose, is probably going to be one of my more vulnerable ones and more reflective voice memos. So I'm currently on holiday in Sitges, which is in the south of Spain near Barcelona. And it's a place that's known for gay culture. So a lot of gay men come here, there's nudist beaches, there's gay bars, there's a scene, if you like. Now, I've been to San Francisco twice, which I absolutely loved. It's one of my favourite places on the planet, and just such a great place, besides the awful homelessness, a great place in general. Coming here, obviously it's a different country, it's a different place, I didn't expect the same experience, but I've actually learnt more about myself than I did in San Francisco. And I don't know why, I just thought, on paper, you'd think you'd learn more about your kind of queer identity in a place like San Francisco. But what this place has kind of taught me so far is that I feel disconnected from a lot of gay or queer culture, but not in like a judgmental way. So, I've been to nudist beaches, a lot of naked men, obviously loads of queer men in the district where there's the bars and stuff, and I don't fully feel connected, or particularly things like seeing the naked men on the beach and stuff is actually a turn off for me. I think a lot of people would be turned on by that, and that's why they come here, right? And they want to do that, and absolutely no judgment. Whereas for me, it's a complete turn off. Like, it so unbelievably sends me the other way. It's like someone smashing the off button. And I've questioned, am I maybe internally homophobic? Do I have some internally homophobic views that, like, I've maybe not untangled yet? However, through reflection and doing a bit of research, reading articles, I don't think I'm internally homophobic. That, the internal homophobia is this, I think it can show up in different ways, but say some examples might be like, I'm not like them, or feeling uncomfortable around a more flamboyant gay man, or taking the piss out of other gay men when you're gay, or being harshly judgmental toward certain gay men and how they express themselves. I don't feel like that at all. I think it's just more, I don't fit in with that dominant culture, or subculture, I should say, really. And that's fine. That's okay. But I think maybe a lot of queer people feel this way, but either don't want to say it, or, might feel judged for not fully fitting in with the community or the culture. I think culture is probably a better word than the community. And there are, of course, different types of cultural variations and subcultural variations. But I think it's been an interesting journey.
Well, there we go. I think that's... Do I need to say anything? So that was like a voice note, but I just basically said it all. No, I have more to say on that. So, and quite a lot actually. I was frantically writing notes because there's quite a few different strands I'd like to go down there actually. And again, I opened up quite a lot. I think it was in episode 2 or 3, Evan. I think it might have been 3, where I was talking a lot about like neurodivergence and mental health and therapy and life coaching that I've been through before. And I suppose this now is getting more specifically within the realm of my like gender and sexuality and sexual identity as well. I think a theme of my life is not fitting in, and that's where I then become quite sensitive to that when, say, I'm on holiday, or when I come across something new. Like I was in a new I've been to Spain before actually, so I was in a new place, a new city, town in Spain, never been there before, never been anywhere on like a beach resort like that in Europe where it was like explicitly gay either. So it's a new place, and I felt again like I wasn't quite fitting in, and that's a theme throughout my life that I've come to terms with a lot more now, but still is a bit sensitive for me. So, if we go back, at this point, you've learned quite a lot about me, my upbringing, where I come from, my identity, lots of different things, and not fitting in terms of, when I was younger, never really feeling like a boy or a man, but also not feeling like a girl or woman either. So that's why I identify as non-binary. I primarily use they, them pronouns, but I'm also fine with he, him pronouns because sometimes I quite like it actually, and it's fine. Like, it doesn't have to be rigid. It can be fluid in that way where sometimes it's he, sometimes it's they, sometimes it's both. But also non-binary, when I first learned about that concept, it really resonated with me because I was like, oh, okay, yes, that makes sense. Like, all my life I felt uncomfortable around men. I've already talked in this episode about feeling more comfortable around women. But I don't really feel comfortable around men. But also when someone calls me a boy or a man, that could be positive, negative, somewhere in between. So isn't Connor a handsome man, or isn't Connor an awful man, or whatever? I wouldn't think, oh, handsome, lovely, or hot, or awful. Oh, I'd think, man, they just call me a... Ooh, that's weird. It doesn't ring. It doesn't sound right when they say man. That's the bit I would focus on, whether it's a compliment or criticism or whatever. But I also don't feel like a girl or a woman either. So that's where non-binary is quite nice. It explains
the internal feeling that I have that some people don't agree with. I'm not here to convince you actually about my lived experience. So you could say you don't believe in non-binary people. Well, I'm sat here now. I'm a real person. That's my experience. You could not believe in something that's right, in your ears or in your eyes, whatever you're seeing me or listening to me, whatever. I'm not actually here to persuade you of that, because that's how I felt all of my life, and that's important. So I didn't fit in a gender way. I didn't fit in a sexuality way of being queer, trying to hide that. So I now identify as queer because, so some people use queer as like a synonym for not straight. Others, like myself, use it in a more fluid way where my sexuality isn't rigid. So sometimes I feel gay, sometimes I feel bi. I've been with women, I've been with men, I've been with other genders. I had a long-term relationship with a woman. I've had a long-term relationship with a man. That was another thing with the not fitting in that was quite difficult in previous years. I'd say to gay men or queer people, oh yeah, no, I've had a girlfriend. So, you've had a girlfriend? What? And then you'd say to straight people, I've had a girlfriend. You've had a girlfriend? What? Like, so you're like, oh my God, I can't fit in anywhere here. Like everyone just getting judgment from all corners. But I identify as queer because then some months not really interested, a bit asexual, or like kind of like on that spectrum, and then it's all over the place. Your sexuality might be rigid, good for you, but mine isn't. So not fitting in that way, being working class where there are more the rougher versions of masculinity. People might not be, not always, but where I grew up, not so accepting of difference. That could be racial difference, gender, sexuality, etc. Not fitting in class. So I've told you about playing tennis. So when I was younger and I used to go to the tennis club that I first played at was in a middle class area, and I was the lad from the council estate. So we keep seeing this across my life. I don't fit into one box, which used to upset me. I used to feel like I want to just fit in. Actually, it's just easier. My lived experience would be easier. This would be better for me. Why can't people just accept me the way I am? Or should I change to fit in? Whereas now, through those other things like therapy and all the other work I've done, I like not fitting in. I think it's great. And that does come with a bit of age as well, and experience and maturity, I think, over time, and experiences you have in life. Actually, it's quite nice to not fit into those boxes. However, now and again, I'll go to somewhere like Sitges, I'll see a certain... that's a certain, like, if you want to call it subculture, there within queer communities. Like, there, people are on holiday. It's very sexual. There's sex, like bars, if you like. Cruising is even more of a thing. People are there. It's lovely weather. They've had a drink. You're feeling a bit looser, and you're people go on holiday. They want more sex, that kind of thing, and then I'm there like, absolutely not. Like, I've gone totally the other way and I don't fit in again. I feel like, oh, actually there's a certain cultural thing here in this place. I mentioned in another episode about the Australian woman that said, I shouldn't tell anyone I'm queer, there's only two genders, my shirt's ugly, I should wear something more flamboyant, I should do this, I should do that. And I'm just sat there like, I don't think I said in that episode, actually. I had one sangria with them, went to the toilet, and I left the bill with them because I thought, you can fucking pay for my sangria, you're offensive. You can fill in the blanks there. If it was more than that, I would have paid it myself. But I thought, you know what, you can pay for my one sangria because you just literally just attacked me for half an hour, and I've just sat here like trying my hardest not to get into a frigging argument. And her asking me loads of, what do you like sexually? Are you into this? Are you into that? Do you want to do this? Why? He kept asking me, okay, so what are you into? I'm not going to say now. I would say just like the usual stuff. Pretty vanilla, to be quite honest. Another thing that gets shamed a lot in queer cultures as well. But yeah, pretty vanilla. Okay, so you don't want to do this thing. You don't want to do that thing. And I'm like, they're like, no. Oh, why are you here? Why have you come to Sitges? For a holiday. Like, I've come here to relax, to sunbathe, to go in the sea, to drink, to eat, to read, to walk, to all these things. I didn't book this holiday to come and shag loads of strangers, and it's absolutely fine if people do that, but I didn't do that. So that kind of judgment was there of not fitting in again. And I think I had reflections in the initial voice note, and now doing it now, it's like inception levels of reflection, because now I've had some critical distance from the holiday, from that voice note. I'm able to go, that's what it was, actually. This is also what therapy does for you. Therapy is really, really good because not only does it help you to like go back to your past, think about where traumas came from, why you think a certain way, how you could change behaviours. It does increase your emotional intelligence of other people. So it's increased my compassion, my empathy, my sympathy for people. Certain groups of people I still find hard to be compassionate towards, as you've probably gathered throughout this series so far. But I do my best where I can to add that nuance, etc. But yeah, I think that's also like you become more intelligent in that way, where you're able to connect the dots with yourself better. And actually, what I can do here is say that it was that of not fitting in again, and not. I found that as well throughout when I came out when I was 21, initially as bi, and then went through the journey bi, gay. Now I'm at queer. Of initially being like, well, I'm not a twink, I'm not a bear, I'm not a daddy, I'm not all these things. I remember going on Grindr for the first time and seeing all the tribes: pos, otter, twink, bear, daddy, jock, gamer, which I quite enjoy, even though I'm not a gamer. I do enjoy that. And all these different tribes, and I'm like, I'm not in any of them. Like, I'm not a skinny, no, twink usually is skinny, white, feminine guy. I'm not that. I have a femininity to me, but you know what I mean? I'm not that kind of type. I'm certainly not a bear. I'm certainly not a daddy. I'm 21 at that point. Although it's sad now being 31, because I'm soon going to get in that range, that like age range where I'm going to get people in their early 20s messaging me, calling me daddy, and I'm going, oh, please don't. So hopefully that never happens. But yes, again, that's another thing where I was like, I don't fit in here. And then not fitting in, that's fine, right? Like, I have my own ways of expressing my identity and being queer, and find people, like-minded people, and not having to fit in with maybe a dominant culture or dominant subculture in this case. I think it's always worth asking yourself if you do have some internalized homophobia, and I think at points I might have done throughout my life, as a lot of gay or queer men do, actually. I think, unfortunately, because of the society that we're brought up in, that it's quite hard not to have some shame, some internalized shame or homophobia. And I think in my past, my past self did have that. But over time, I've been able to go, actually, I'm not going to judge what other people do. I don't want to be judged either. I talked about that in a previous episode, about not wanting to like be perceived in certain ways. And I just want to be my little self going through the world where no one judges me. But yeah, I definitely check yourself, though, if you are one of those people that thinks like you're not like those gays and you're different and stuff. Or I've met some gay men in the past that will like almost take the piss a bit if you then are a bit camp or a bit feminine and stuff, almost, as Judith Butler would call it, like policing your gender. Even though they're also part of the marginalised group that you're part of, they're still policing it, and that's how pervasive patriarchy and masculinity and traditional masculinity can be. Yes, and I remember I think the internalised homophobia used to come from when people would maybe say things like, "Oh, you're so gay," and I'd be like, I'd feel kind of annoyed or a bit angry about that, actually. Like, you're so gay, like. I think it's because there is, even though it's not now, I wouldn't consider it a bad thing. Again, it's another form of judgment. Whereas now, if someone went, "You're so gay," I'd be like, okay, then you've pointed a fact out about me. Like, what do you want me to say to that? Like, I'll probably just go like, "Yeah, I know," laugh or whatever. Whereas in the past, that would be like, oh, like a bit of sting, like, oh, like they know I'm gay. It's obvious. Come on now. Like, it's interesting, like, family members and some friends would say to me, "Oh, I don't always see you in that way," where how other people maybe see you as really camp or really gay or really feminine because you're just Connor to us. Whereas it's, I think about a few years ago now, a student said to me, came up to me at the end of the lesson and said, I know it's a bit of an invasive question, but I'm questioning my sexual identity at the moment, and I just wondered, I was thinking that you're not straight either because I can kind of like smell the rainbow. And I was like, oh, I love that, smell the rainbow. So now I use it all the time. Like, can you smell the rainbow on that person? It smells a bit of the rainbow, right? But that's quite nice that I've had students do that actually in the past, because then they've wanted to talk to me about their identity and my experiences and how they could come to terms with it. So yeah, it's it's not a secret, is it? Let's be honest. And I would have said that 10 years ago, like inside, like a bit of shame, like, oh, it's not a secret, is it? Whereas now I'm like, it's not a secret, it's absolutely fine. So in my like early 20s or mid 20s, that would sting a bit more. And I think going on that kind of holiday and not fitting in, I actually think would have been even worse than it was when I was there. I mean, say even worse. It wasn't that stressful or mentally damaging, but I think it would have been worse because I would have felt like I need to fit in some way. And maybe that's something a lot of younger people kind of, I don't know, is it controversial to say, to have to go through, to come out the other end, to feel like you don't? Like, you see it a lot where people do feel like they need to do a certain thing. That might be taking drugs, it might be going out more, dressing a certain way, speaking a certain way, going on certain holidays, hanging out with a particular group of people where deep down they don't really enjoy, yet they feel like they need to do it. Is that a rite of passage? Maybe. That's an arguable point, but is it a rite of passage for some young people in lots of different ways, but maybe young queer people to come out the other end and go, actually, no, I enjoy the things I enjoy. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to stop shaming myself and stop judging myself. I'm going to do what I want to do, and that's that. So liberating. I'm not fully there yet. Fully. Obviously, going from that, being there in Sitges and still being a bit sensitive about not fitting in, but I'm getting closer, I think, to being completely comfortable with myself and those things not bothering me as much. I will say, though, the beach I was near, I didn't know was a nudist beach. So, lovely apartment. It's actually in the San Sebastian area. So if you've been to Sitges, you'd know where that is. So it's just slightly out of like the main part of the town. And I had a beach a 2-minute walk away. So I was going there because obviously it was really close. It was nice. It wasn't too busy. And it was day one. It was like early evening. I thought I'll go for a swim before going out for a drink. And then obviously tomorrow I'll do like more sunbathing. And got there. I was like, oh, okay, quite a few naked people here. Quite a few naked people. Spain, it's liberal. And then, as it went on, I was like, okay, I've seen every body part possible. Boobs, vaginas, bums, penises, all sorts, all genders, all sorts of different things going on. And I think that actually, I can't remember what the term is now. There is a psychological term, like when you have too much stimuli, it sends you the other way. And I feel like that's what happens with me. When I first went to a gay sauna, which actually was earlier this year, I was the only person with my swim trunks on because I had genuinely gone for the sauna, the steam room, the jacuzzi, chill out. It was a really cold day. It was January. So I'll go in a nice warm place and I might meet some people. That's not why most people go to a gay sauna. Most people were naked and most people would be like, this is why I'm here. And I was there like, put it away. Like if I had pearls, I would have just been constantly clutching them. Like, oh no, I don't want to see it. Put it away. I like that, like a sense of mystery. And I know there would be queer people out there now that are thinking, God's sake, get over it. Like that would actually judge that because they have that more, maybe more sexually driven. So yeah, I kind of had points in the holiday where I was thinking to myself, I feel like this should be doing something. Like this should be working. But it's really, really not. And you know what? Again, it's absolutely fine. And I spoke to quite a few people about it, and they've said similar that sometimes you do want that little bit of mystery. You don't want to see it all straight away. So there we go. So quite a lot of introspection there for you all. Get to know me a little bit more as well. And maybe that resonated with some of you. And if it did, you can get in touch with us on TikTok and YouTube in the comments. And you can also email vnfcpodcast@outlook.com, and you can also send your voice notes that might feature in future episodes or a future series as well. So I always like to thank you for tuning in and listening. I really appreciate it. Ciao for now. You've been listening to Voice Notes from Connor, created, hosted and starring me, Connor Winterton. Produced and edited by Evan Greaves. If you'd like to get in touch, you can message us on TikTok and YouTube. And if you'd like to get in touch via email, our email address is vnfcpodcast@outlook.com. You can send us any feedback, any thoughts on the episodes, as well as your own voice notes that might make it into future episodes or future series. So that was vnfcpodcast@outlook.com. Thank you very much.